Causes of the Easter Rising 1916. How the war contributed to the Rising. The war was the most wide-ranging factor in the causing of the Rising, and it provided the opportunity and some motivation. Historian Alvin Jackson on the Rising, virtually unimaginable without the war. Provided the opportunity. Patrick Pearse in the proclamation said, "England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity, because England's attention and the troops were fighting in Germany." Army's poor treatment of the Irish volunteers. Kitchener regarded the IVF as potential rebels when they joined the British Army, therefore he refused to allow the formation of a new Irish regiment, unlike the UVF getting the 36th Ulster Division. Also, the IVF were not allowed their own officers, badges, colours, or OTC in the National Catholic University, all in contrast to the UVF. This slowly bred resentment against British rule. Split of Irish Volunteers, IVF. Redmond's Wooden Bridge speech committed the Irish volunteers to fight wherever the firing line extends. This meant that most of the IVF went to fight in France in the British Army and left 12,000 more radical volunteers behind under Owen McNeill. This impacted in two ways. Firstly, it removed the cream of the IVF that supported Redmond from Ireland, and secondly, it left behind a smaller radical group that was easier to manipulate by the IRB. Tom Kettle, former IPP MP who fought in the war, said, "These men, the 1916 leaders, will go down in history as heroes and martyrs, and I will go down, if I go down at all, as a bloody British officer." Political vacuum. Home Rule was delayed until the end of the war. This meant that the IPP's main policy of Home Rule was frustratingly out of reach, and nothing politically was happening in Ireland. Owen McNeill described Home Rule as a cheque that is constantly post-dated. The IRB were ready to fill this vacuum. Formation of the coalition government. In May 1915, the Liberals brought Conservatives and Unionists into the government in response to big defeats in the war. Home Rule became even more unlikely with Carson and Bonar Law in the cabinet. Safety valve removed. The war stopped emigration that traditionally removed the most disaffected Irishmen to other countries. Ulster resistance. This inspired the Republicans to use similar tactics. Carsonism. Carson's mix of parliamentary and militant tactics were more successful than Redmond's. Patrick Pearse says, "The Orange man with a rifle is a much less ridiculous figure than the Nationalist without one." UVF. The formation of the UVF November 1913 and the successful gun running July 1914 brought the gun back into Irish politics. This prompted the formation of the IVF, essential for the Rising. Gaelic revival created the atmosphere for a rising. Cultural nationalism. The Gaelic League and GAA showed that Ireland was a different country culturally from England. It was a small step for the people to demand a different government. Patrick Pearse, quote, "It is now time for the new generation to win the nationhood which the Gaelic revival has set its sights." The IRB drive, the single most important cause of the Rising. Without the organisation and drive of the IRB, the Rising would not have happened. IRB Military Council. This revolutionary cell formed by Clark and McDermott operated in secrecy within the IRB. This organised the military plan, including what buildings to occupy. IVF formation split. The 12,000 volunteers left under McNeill provided a hard core to be manipulated. Pearse, McDermott and Plunkett all held key positions within the IVF. Blood sacrifice. Patrick Pearse believed there are many more things horrible than bloodshed, and slavery is one of them. Pearse's notion of fighting and dying for Ireland was crucial in the Rising go-ahead, especially when it became clear that it had no chance of success. Owen McNeill was willing to support the Rising as long as the guns came from Germany. McNeill tried to stop it when he heard Casement and the German guns had been captured. A military failure, however, was not going to stop Pearse. "From the graves of patriot men and women spring living nations," quote from Patrick Pearse. James Connolly's Irish Citizen Army Socialism. Connolly was against the capitalist war and believed that the rifle was a weapon with a worker on both ends. "We serve neither king nor Kaiser but Ireland," Connolly quote. He was embarrassed that his generation had not had a revolution, and was eventually convinced to throw his weight behind the IRB plot when he was the last member to join the military council. "The cause of Ireland is the cause of Labour." Connolly quote. Castle document. Convinced MacNeill, temporarily, that the IVF was about to be suppressed by the authorities. This was most likely a forgery by McDermott and Plunkett, allowed the IVF to mobilise and prepare for resistance, used in the rising. German support. Although some support did come from Germany, this was very limited despite British claims after the rising. However, confusion over the delivery of the guns did offer the IRB the chance to use the Irish volunteers. Irish revolutionary tradition had always attempted to involve England's enemies, French in 1798 and 1803. Confusion over guns from Germany. The Germans did attempt to send 20,000 rifles, but the Royal Navy intercepted the ship AD. Owen MacNeill had been willing to support the rising as long as the guns had arrived. If MacNeill had cancelled the volunteers' mobilisation as soon as he heard about the rising, instead of delaying until he heard about the guns, he would have stopped the IRB using the Dublin Brigade of the IVF in the rising against his wishes. Complacency of British government. Contradictory reports. Roger Casement captured and MacNeill cancels the volunteers' mobilisation. Conclusion. The war was very important for creating the conditions for a rising by undermining the IPP and creating a political vacuum for the IRB to fill. However, without the idea, organisation and determination of the IRB to have a revolution against all odds, the rising could not have happened. Moreover, Carson and the UVF have proved that militant tactics could work. When this combined with the inspiration of the Gaelic revival and the prospect of German help, it is obvious that the war is a very important but only one of the number of reasons for the Easter Rising.